Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
That black space, that blackness, that darkness that we see, sometimes it makes us feel very uncomfortable. I brought that up on purpose so we can actually think about that darkness and judgment. When we are in a place of judgment, we are judging other people, we are judging circumstances, things maybe that we don't have all the knowledge that we might need to, we start to judge. And so that's what this program is about, Judgment, the Hidden Sin. I actually wrote this book, Holy But Harmful, The Silent Sin of Judgment, because I became very much aware of judgment around me and even judgment that I had myself that I wasn't aware of. So the purpose of this show is for education and awareness. It's not to be judging you or you judging me. So thank you for being here today. We're going to be talking about hidden judgments that shape global politics and leadership and decision making. That's a lot to go over in 40 minutes, but I am not here alone. We have an expert in this field as well as many others. He has joined us before and he comes to us through Creative Edge. Thank you very much. His name is Humphrey Hawksley. He's joining us from the UK and he is an expert correspondent for many years on television with the BBC. He's an author. He is someone who really gets to the heart of the issue, and I'm excited to explore this topic with him. Let's welcome him to the program. Hello, sir. Nice to have you.
Hello, Jacalyn. It's great to be here.
Well, when I first met you, I felt that charismatic energy that you have and that personality. You are made for television. So thank you for being here. Before we get into the topic, you really are a legend. And I'd love for you to just share a brief overview of how you got into the media industry, and then we'll jump into the topic because I think that's really relevant.
Since a young person, I wanted to travel. I'm curious about people, and I wanted someone to pay for my travel. And I was, back in 1975, there was a cyclone, a typhoon that knocked down the northern Australian town of Darwin. And I was there as a backpacker at the time. And I stayed on, a lot of people were evacuated. I stayed on to rebuild the houses and start rebuilding the town. And in those few days, the press corps arrived and they interviewed people, they wrote their stories, and then after about a week they were gone and everybody had forgotten about it. I said, that's a pretty good job, isn't it? You go into an interesting place, everybody's interested, you get a little bit of fame, you get a byline in those days and that sort of thing. I quite like to do that. So that's what I did. I mean, it took a bit of time to get to that level, but I went back to work in Australia. I worked in Hong Kong, and then I came back to London, which was my home, and joined the BBC. And you start in these big news organizations. It's changed a bit now because of the technology and everything. You started doing it, up against the millstone in the newsroom, and then there's a break. Somebody gets sick, or you can move in. So I went down to Sri Lanka and covered the civil war in Sri Lanka back in the 80s, then to India, then to the Philippines when they had a people power revolution that overthrew the dictator Ferdinand Marcos, then to Hong Kong, and then to China, and then back to London, really to cover the war on terror and Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that. And that just becomes a sort of rolling I don't know what it is, a rolling series of stories of how the world works, how the jigsaw pieces fit together. And to the topic we've got here, Jacalyn, how decisions are made, what the judgment is on one society or one leader against another.
Absolutely. You've touched on so many points that really could be TV show episodes in and of themselves. So thank you again for taking the time to be here. When we think about what's going on in the world, and obviously you have one perspective, I have another. As individuals, we all have different perspectives, but many times people actually believe, I'm going to throw myself in here because I've done it myself, we believe our perspective is the only one. And what happens from that is what I call judgment. Sometimes the judgment's hidden. We don't actually discuss it with anyone, or maybe in our small circle we do. But one judgment builds on another and another, and it just ripples around the world. And before you know it, we've got people at a standstill looking at one another, even though we're all the collective humanity saying, yeah, I don't like you. I don't want anything to do with you. And meanwhile, I don't even know you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. I think, I mean, and right now you just have to look at the headlines and look what you and I, as part of the Western culture, for want of a better word, are told other countries are. And I think that in that respect, we have we have an issue. I remember, I'll go back a bit. I think it was the transition that was going on between Obama and the first Trump administration. I was on a panel in Washington, D.C. It was about the media, but the guy on my right or left on the panel was a pro-Trump Republican congressman. And the panel had various other people on it. And I said to him, I said, look, we've all only got 5 minutes. I said, there's a number of things we shouldn't really discuss here. He said, this is a democracy. We're free. We can discuss anything. I said, no, because we haven't got time. He said, well, what are they? And I said, well, I come from Europe and you come from the US. So we shouldn't discuss gun control. We shouldn't discuss abortion. We shouldn't discuss social care or healthcare. And he looked at me aghast and he said, why not? I said, because I was raised under a certain culture and a certain set of societies, and you were raised under another. And we're not going to change each other's minds about what's good or that in the next five minutes, certainly on this. And so why not discuss something that we can actually exchange ideas on? And he sort of saw my point. And then I said, and there's a fifth one. And he said, oh, what's that? I said, see that guy at the end? He was a professor, a Chinese professor from a university. I think he was from Princeton, but he was also with Beijing University in the days that they had that sort of stuff going on. And I said, see that guy at the end? He said, yeah. I said, and don't discuss democracy. And he sort of went like this, because that's the core of the American belief. He said, well, I said, well, because he's been raised in a system that doesn't believe in it. And that system's actually done quite well. And you're not going to persuade him that it's the wrong system in 5 minutes. And he sort of looked at that. And I said, and at the end of it, to get back to your point, Jacalyn, I said, so you don't judge the people by what they believe in, what you think. They don't pigeonhole them. Just listen to what they've got to say.
That is brilliant. And I want to just ask a question off of that. What if each of us decided to be open to hearing someone else's perspective? What would that look like?
As a reporter, that's what I do. That's in my DNA. So I can go to anybody and say, why are you doing this? What are you doing? So in the issues that are around at the moment, I will be perfectly happy interviewing the foreign minister or the foreign secretary or whatever it is of Iran, as well as interviewing J.D. Vance or whatever on their perspective on it, interviewing China, those people there, and just let them give their points of view. And then it's my job as a journalist, or I'll go back on that. It's my job as I was trained as a journalist sort of 30 years ago or so. It's slightly different now. But I would then put all that together and weigh up all those arguments and write them into a piece. I think when I say that it's changed now, and judgment is, we're getting more judgmental, and we're getting more closed off to hearing opposite ideas. And that is why we're sort of, we're getting into this bad situation. But instead of saying, for example, China's actually, it's an authoritarian dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, but it has actually taken 100 million people out of poverty, which some of these new democracies in Africa haven't been able to do. And that's a factor. You've got to actually accept that as a fact. You can't say, oh, that doesn't count because they're a dictatorship. It's like saying that doesn't count because somebody is of a certain gender or a certain color. So we've got to be very careful about how we judge and what the result of that judgment is.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing your work about being a journalist. I am not a journalist. I am a broadcaster. So there are completely different perspectives. But what I find in the role that I'm in, even today, people will post comments while we're live, and the comments are filled with judgment. It's kind of like, do you have anything else you could be doing? You just decided to drop by. People call me different names and say really mean things. And so it seems to span from something as innocuous and innocent as something on social media that then can steamroll throughout a person's life. So my question for you is, at the core of everything, we are humans before we put on a hat to be something. At what stage in our life does that childlike curiosity and wonder, your children like, oh, everything's so interesting, and someone says, well, that's wrong, you have to go to your room or you're punished. What is it that happens to us that we become, I don't want to use the word tarnished because that's a judgmental word, but we're no longer open to possibility, to curiosity?
Well, I think it's when as a child, and I'm guessing here, because when as a child you get disciplined for talking to the wrong person. Oh, you shouldn't talk to them. That's a poor neighborhood. Or don't talk to them. They belong to the wrong sports team. You can't have that person in the house because of such and such. I think that sort of ingrains itself into it. And then the conversation around the table, what words to use now in particular, it is important, or what things you can and cannot say. And that has become, you talk about social media, that is becoming, it's much easier to judge somebody and put out a comment on social media and feel that your self-esteem has been lifted for 2 seconds because you've done that and you're an important person, and you can boast about being angry about somebody or reprimanding somebody. It's much more difficult to learn about the issue and then work out where you as a person feel about that. So when I was, and the key element of this, in a way, Jacalyn, is tribalism, and tribalism particularly when it comes to democracy. So when we in the West, I say, were exporting democracy around the world in the post-colonial period after the Second World War, you would go to a country like Sri Lanka, say, which was my first foreign posting, and you have a predominantly Buddhist Sinhalese population and a minority, but very sort of powerful, influential Tamil Hindu population. When it comes to the ballot box, the Sinhalese vote for the Sinhalese and the Tamils vote for the Tamils. And therefore, you will never have a shared government. It will always be a predominantly Sinhalese government. Now, that could be all right if race and religion doesn't come into it. But in this case, and we're hearing it in today's politics, in order to get elected, a politician can claim that the other tribe, religion, ethnicity is a threat. And that gets them votes. But in order to do that, they have to prove that that other tribe, ethnicity is a threat. So in the case of Sri Lanka, which I just mentioned there, is that the Sinhalese pushed down, discriminated against, repressed the Tamils so much that the Tamils then fought back. and there was a civil war that lasted 25 years. And that is partly because of this democratic process that we put in there, which was meant to be the best thing to pick a government. But if you have what I call birthright democracy, then you're not judging the economy or how the money is spent or the schools or the roads. There's no judgment there. You will vote for your tribe, and the bigger tribe will win the election.
2 points that I really took away clearly from that. First is the word threat. When we feel threatened, or we feel that the leadership is threatening, we are afraid. We have fear, because it might mean that there's change coming. And if there's change coming, that might mean we have to actually do something, and we might not want to do it. And the other point is that we get certain things instilled in us. You mentioned as children, you get reprimanded, even as adults, even working in an organization for a long time, you're used to whatever that mindset is and that leadership is. And so we carry that into our other relationships. So are we all on the precipice of doom? Or is it possible that we can actually make conscious decisions so that we don't have to just do the same thing over and over again because we're afraid of the outcome?
I think we as individuals can make those decisions and free ourselves from this world of threat. Because the threat, I mean, you must bump into people all the time where everything is bad, and everything that you want to do has got a problem attached to it, and you walk out of you walk out of the house with somebody, and everybody that's seen is doing something wrong. This is a sort of deeply personal, psychological situation that people get themselves into. And I think it's made a lot worse by social media and by this sort of instantaneous gratification that we get. So I think in your case and my case, we have got the freedom to do that and free up our minds. But in the case of politics, it is easy, or who leads our country, it is easier to create a fear than it is to actually fix the potholes of the road or get the schools working, because that doesn't hit the headlines. Fear hits the headlines. And if you think of, say, I sort of take 9/11 almost as a year zero, and then up to that as something else. But you take 9/11 up until now, in Europe, but certainly in the States, foreign policy has been based on threat. Is it the Islamic threat? Is it the Al-Qaeda threat? And then briefly, when everything quietened down for a bit, it was the China threat. And now it's back again to the Iran threat. And if you look at these organizations, as I have, they are a threat in that they, that they can plant bombs and all that sort of thing. But they're not a sort of threat to our societies or our values or anything like that. But they're put on a platform of threat, because in that way it's easier for politicians to win votes.
You just mentioned headlines. And to many people, they see a headline and they never go any further. So I'm also a peace ambassador, and I always ask people to do research, find references to corroborate or discount, say, hey, this is not actually what it is that we see in the media. But most people don't want to do that. And to your point about the naysayers, when you are coming from a negative mindset, you're constantly looking for the negative. It's almost like when someone said to me, you're looking at buying a car and you want a red car, and all of a sudden every car you see on the road practically is red. I don't know what the psychology of that is called. And so we see the headlines, and also we see a major shift from how our media is presented and also how it's consumed. So we went from the major networks, at least here in the States, and now most things are streaming. I just did a research project, and more people are watching YouTube than they're watching really anywhere else. So how do we look at this shift in media and the fact that we have the same mindset that we've always had?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because the media is basically unpoliced. Yet, as you say, you've got people like Joe Rogan and Piers Morgan over here who are getting, their ratings are as high as any television channel now, and there's the technology to do it. I think that the cultural leaders, the society leaders, the political leaders haven't caught up with that yet, and it was actually worse when there was a 24-hour news cycle. But I think actually that now that I'm thinking about it, Jacalyn, thanks for the question, is that we are turning a corner a bit, because these the podcast shows that are there, these are 20-30 minute things. What you and I are doing, we have got time to invest, to go deeply into something, and people are going to listen to that throughout. This is much better than getting a 3-minute spot on CBS News or something, because when people are interested, they are compelled to be interested in it. But I think that we're in an industrial revolution at the moment. It's technological. The pace of technological change. Even 10 years ago, we couldn't have done this. There was no chat GPT, there was no artificial, there was nothing like that. And now they've got robots in China running marathons and electric cars with no drivers and all this sort of thing. This huge surge of revolution that's going on here, our society mindsets are not keeping up with it. So I think that the way that American leaders have picked the elections, the electoral college and all that goes way back before they even had motor cars. Here in Britain, you actually have to turn up to vote at sort of 11 o'clock at night in a leather-seated Victorian building. This has got not, and it's meant to be democracy, but actually it's not. It needs to be completely modernized. And it doesn't get modernized because when you get elected, you've exhausted yourself on the campaign trail, and then you get elected and you've got 2 years or 5 years or to get the job done. You're not going to sit around tinkering with the mechanisms of the car in order to get it from A to B. So it all stays as it is. Whilst the technology and society, we're going to have a whole group of young people growing up that don't read many books. They listen to this, they get engaged like this, but they don't read many books. Their attention span is much shorter. The instant gratification of pushing a key on a phone or a thing where something actually happens, you're going to get a whole different mindset. It's no point in saying it's a good or a bad thing. It is happening. So let's get our heads around where we're going to be.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And also, sir, if you can move over a little to the left, I'm looking at the Instagram frame. Yes, there we go. Okay. So one thing that I just want to bring into this, I remember when I was in school, we had something called the debate club or the debate team. And you would get these spirited debates and people would walk away and shake hands and say, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think what we're seeing is a different type of debate across the world, which sometimes actually goes into violence more often than not, or hidden judgments about certain people, certain groups of people. And so what I really want people to take away from this show, regardless of where it is that you are in the world, is you get a choice. And sometimes the choice is an educated choice. And sometimes it's reaching out and saying, hey, I'd like to learn more. Maybe I'm not going to agree, but I'd like to understand your position. Now, does this actually go on in politics or in leadership at a global level?
Well, it does, but can I ask you a question before I answer that? Do you have red lines? Are there people that you would not have on your show because of their what they've said or what they think or what they do?
No, no. And in fact, nobody knows what my politics are or what I believe, because I really wanted this to be a space where people can share what it is. Now, if people start to go down some tangent where they are using foul language or it just becomes something filled with hatred, then we're going to be closing the episode early.
Okay, because we have got over here, I mean, since we're current with it, we've got over here these connections with Epstein. That's, you know, anybody who's connected with Epstein is somebody that cannot be connected with somebody like that. So would you have anybody like that on your show, or is that a red line?
No, I'd love to hear from them. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you see, this is a hopeless show for your viewers, because you and I completely agree with that. So I would have had bin Laden on, you know, on that, you know, why did you do this?
Right.
And actually I looked into this. Why did you do it? And he didn't do it he did it to get American troops out of Saudi Arabia. I mean, it was quite a straightforward thing. Why is China taking control of the South China Sea, which it did about, you know, built military bases along one of the world's biggest, you know, most vital sea routes, trade routes. It did it to secure its supply chains, which we now know from why they did it, because of what's happening in Iran. So if you actually drill down on this, you don't have to drill that far, there are real reasons why leaders do what they do. And it's our job, well, not our job, but it's the leaders' job here in the sort of developed world that are leading the world order, to anticipate and manage it so that it doesn't become what Iran has become now, so that gas prices are high and everybody's on tenterhooks and all the rest of it. That was completely unnecessary. I often go back to the 1930s, when Hitler was rising in Germany. Germany was aggrieved because of the way it had been treated after its defeat in the First World War. And that grievance gave rise to Hitler. Is there any way we could have tackled that differently? Is there any way that we could have taken a lesson from that and used it with Russia and Vladimir Putin? I don't know the answers to that, but I also don't know whether it's been discussed.
That is a deep topic and one that needs to be explored. And I think, to your point, yes, there are circumstances where people have mental health issues, right? Maybe they've been abused, whatever scenario is their backstory. But what I really believe is that every one of us wants to feel heard and wants to feel safe. And when that doesn't happen, then we start to withdraw. And as we withdraw, maybe we're not actually aware of what's going on. I can't diagnose humanity, but I think at the core of it, if you were to give someone an opportunity to share, why did you do this? Why are you doing this? And an example is one of our team members is in a country where they actually are subjected to potential kidnapping and cannibalism. And so the person and their other people they're with are there to teach. And so they are risking their lives to teach students and to help people see a different way. And so I was very curious, why would you risk your life to do this? Well, because I believe that I have the opportunity to help someone, to give someone the opportunity growing up in a scenario like this, a voice, a place to share. So I personally, as a peace ambassador, Dr. Jacalyn, feel like if we had more of that going on and giving people the opportunity to speak, maybe we'd be in a situation where there was more peace. But my question for you, point counterpoint, I've had many people tell me that it's not possible to live in a world without war, because without war, there is no peace. So you want to take a stab at that one?
Oh, yes. I was going to ask you another question, but this is a bigger one. I mean, our human condition is a violent one. And I think that as each war that happens, going back to the Treaty of Westphalia in Europe in the 17th century. You know, Europe was divided into states that all had their sovereignty and that sort of thing. It was designed to stop the next war happening, but the next war always does happen. And after the Second World War, they had the big idea, which was the creation of the United Nations. And then there was creation of the European Union, which was to stop France and Germany fighting, or Europe fighting amongst itself. Hugely successful up to a point. But we've had in the past few years, say the past 5 years, these fractures. Russia going into Ukraine, which was, you know, Russia's initiative. But now we've got America going into Iran. Why? I don't know if anybody quite understands why that's happening. But then in the 1939, 1940, you had something that everybody did understand why, because you had a fascist dictator in Germany. And then even more, they understood it when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941. But why did Japan bomb Pearl Harbor? Why do we get ourselves into a situation where you hear these leaders saying, I have no other choice, but they do have a choice? And without getting into the deep politics of it, in the current Iran thing, the war against Iran is a war of choice by the United States. And I have no idea, I personally have no idea why they did it, apart from the personalities of the people that are executing that war. And what do they actually hope to get out of it? I've also just been to the meeting with a contact of mine about America's supposed intention to take Greenland. Why are the, you know, Greenland isn't a threat. There's no reason to do that. But I think, as I said earlier, it creates a better headline. And those headlines are what get politicians elected. So war is an electoral winner as long as you win that war.
Fascinating. And we could talk about this in depth. And I'm sure that our audience has a lot of questions. I just want to say, I see things coming in. We can't get to them right now, but we will after the show. So a question I have about that, you just brought up Greenland, for example. So much of what I read, again, who knows if it's been validated, verified, because that's really important, is that Greenland is sort of like a positioning piece, even though it's a country, even though it's basically, well, let's put people against each other. Let's intentionally create this division. And so when you intentionally divide people, then you as the leader have control of certain groups of people. But at the same time, you're also putting other groups of people at bay, saying, you know what, I'm not listening to what you have to say. It's not relevant. It's not important. Get in line and follow along with what I say. So what are your thoughts about that? Because it sounds like a lose-lose.
Well, I think it is a lose-lose. I mean, there's the American culture, and this is different to the European culture, is American culture needs a win-lose in it. And I think it all gets down to the sort of Clint Eastwood riding into the town, killing the bad guys, and then riding out again, and everything's fine. And I hear this from a number of diplomats and people that have worked over there on both sides of the thing. Whereas in Europe, because the stakes are much higher, because Europe is constantly fighting each other, Europeans have an instinct on how to compromise. That you don't have to use your particular ideology in order to get this far. You can settle for going this far, because they know from their history that if they go too far, you know, the countries are going to fight each other. So I think there is this, I mean, it's an intractable one. And again, it gets down to this, it gets down to judgment. And ultimately, if you look at the leaders, Churchill, Nixon, Trump, all of these people, They are motivated to go that extra mile because of what they feel inside themselves, how they are judging the world, how they feel the world is going to judge them, what their legacy is going to be, and all of that. You very rarely will get a technocratic leader that can control the charisma. It has the charisma to control, to command authority. Also with the technocratic mindset to say, no, this is a sensible thing to do here. This is a sensible thing to do here. Obama was very sensible on a number of issues, seemingly sensible, because he let the Chinese take the South China Sea. He cut the Iran deal that has been torn up. He didn't do very much when Russia invaded Crimea. Now, of course, 10 years or more on, he's being condemned for that. So you never quite know, whether your judgment is going to be right, whether you should make the move now or shouldn't make the move now. And it's quite tricky at the top there.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the word legacy, which I think is truly a key word. And something else that's coming up for me is when we think about, you mentioned Epstein and people that, knew him, were involved with him, were on the plane, went to the island. And then you think of people who are very supportive of Trump, and then people who are very much against Trump. I remember George Carlin had one of his live events, and he was talking about an airport and leaving a bag and don't give anything to unknown persons. And he said, is there anyone who is not known to someone? Surely everyone is known to someone, and also 6 degrees of separation. So we are closer to each other worldwide than we realize. And so when we start to put up walls and say, not her, not him, not them, if we look at our ancestry, we're all interconnected in some way. So it might sound trite, but again, as a peace ambassador, I always look at how can we actually resolve conflict? Well, in order to do that, we have to be aware of the feelings and the thoughts that we individually have, and then collectively say, okay, Humphrey, I really want to understand, what are your thoughts about Americans? What are your thoughts about, and let me understand that, and then vice versa. But many people would say, he's this, she's that, even for talking about this right now.
Yes, I think one of the greatest sort of comments and scenes was when the Artemis spacecraft was going around the moon, and one of the astronauts up there looked down on Earth and said it made us realize we're all one thing. Despite the Iran war was going on at the time and Ukraine war, but when you look down on it like that, and if you're an alien force coming in, you're just seeing one village there, really, aren't you? And how they get, and we can't get on with each other. But of course, in villages, people fight. In families, people fight. And I think that fighting and taking territory and all that sort of thing is part and parcel of what we're doing. And I think, Jacalyn, so we're coming to the end here. I get so many people saying, God, the world's in a dreadful place and aren't we all depressed and everything? No, we are much safer now than we ever have been. We are richer, wealthier, more secure than we ever have been. And if you look back on the past 100 or 200 years, it was constant war, constant conflict, corruption. There wasn't, people couldn't vote. They did have no say. They weren't listened to. They were trodden upon. And bit by bit, that is getting better and better and better every day.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I know when my parents were alive, they used to say things like, oh, you think that this is something? Well, if you were living, well, it's always something that goes on so we can continue to evolve. And because of technology, you and I are able to be here today and do this program, which is incredible. Yeah. So I want to make sure I give you time to tell our audience about your work as an author, and then anything you want to share with them about how they can reach you.
Yes, if you see the Humphrey Hawksley there, if you Google that, or the website is humphreyhawksley.com, the books and my work and travel pieces, food, I do some food pieces as well. All of that comes up. I've done heaps of books, but two series are in mind at the moment. One, several years back, I did what they call military thrillers. The Third World War is coming up there now. That was the last of a trilogy that I did that started with a war between China and America, a war between India, China, and Pakistan. The Third World War was where all the countries, all the main countries, ended up fighting each other, not because they were run by bad people, but because the leaders painted themselves into a situation that it was very difficult to get out of. And I think we can see Iran and America painting itself into a similar situation like that today. The other series that I'm working on now is the Reka Zena series, which is a thriller fiction series based in the Arctic, from a character that comes from an island that is right on the Russian border. So you have a little Diomede island here, and then you have a Russian island here, which is just over 2 miles away. And that is the border between these two antagonistic superpowers. And Reka Zena is my hero, the protagonist, we call them in the trade, who stops, firstly, a Russian invasion of his home island, and then he goes all over the world, saving the world. And the next one that I've got coming out in October is based in Greenland. We haven't got a cover for that yet, and that's going to be called Operation Icebreaker. And that's when he, I won't give too much away, it's when he stops Greenland, NATO, and all these defense alliances disintegrating into nothing. And I think, as I was talking about that, I think quite often when we get to these situations, Jacalyn, it's one or two people that do them. So, you know, you can have all sorts of debates like we're having, or discussion papers and analysts from think tanks and that. But it's usually 2 or 3 people in a room deciding to invade a country or not invade a country or whatever it is. You know, it's very people based. And in the Reka Zena series, and quite often this happens, it's one person. You know, it's one agent or one special forces guy that happens to be in the right place at the right time that stops a disaster happening or creates the conditions for something good to happen. And that's why I think we have to think, when you talk about judgment and this thing, you have to think that, you know, judgment, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's absolutely crucial that when you make a judgment, is it to make things better or to stop harm happening, or is it to make yourself feel good? Because if it's the latter, that's the wrong kind of judgment. You want to say, how do we get this across the line? What is needed to get this done? That's the judgment that's critical.
I love that. And it reminds me of something else that we'll have to talk about on another episode, which is you'll hear the phrase, you used poor judgment on that. I don't like your judgment on that. Judging judgment, which is very interesting.
You're going to get yourself tongue twisted in that.
That's right. Well, thank you, sir, for being here today. I truly appreciate it. I hope you'll come back on another show. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Jacalyn. And thanks for your prompting my thoughts, because you've made me, I'm going to go away bursting with thoughts now and try to judge whether they're good or bad thoughts. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye, Jacalyn.
Thank you so much for watching. And I would really like you to ask yourself, how open are you to other perspectives? How open are you to getting uncomfortable with the unknown? Just being curious. And I practice yoga, and there's a pose called child's pose. And if you know what that is, it's kind of a way that you just go back to basics, go back to grounding yourself and refreshing and being open for what comes from there. And many times in yoga, we don't know what the next pose is. We don't know what's happening in life, the next step. We can plan it out. We can think we have all the answers, but as we know, that's not what happens. It's usually what we don't expect that is what we should expect. So thank you again for watching. I have a new book coming out. It's called Stop Giving Away Your Value. It's coming out next month. I'm doing a keynote, and I'm really excited about this one because we typically are giving everything away for free. And so then when we actually charge for something, people are like, well, wait a minute, I thought it was going to be free. So let's watch this movie trailer and please consider that you stop giving away your value. We all have worth, we all have value, and I really believe you have everything you need inside you right now. Just tap into it. Thanks again for watching. Bye.
How much of your value have you been giving away? Saying yes when the answer should have been no? Lowering your price to secure the opportunity? Giving more while receiving less? Over time, it adds up. Until one moment brings clarity, you've been giving away your value. This is not about working harder. This is not about doing more. It's about boundaries. It's about pricing. It's about respect. From Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK comes a direct and necessary message. Stop over-delivering. Stop underpricing your expertise. Stop negotiating against yourself. Because when you recognize your value, everything changes. Stop giving away your value. Boundaries, pricing, and the business of respect. Available now wherever fine books are sold and on Amazon. A film by USA Global TV and Radio. Executive producer Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK. Videographer and cinematic production Paul Garcia. Voiceover by Ed Vargas. Stop giving it away. Start owning it.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA-Global-TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.